Belinda, I want to start with some facts and figures. And these are relate to the organisation that you lead, ESF. So staff retention at an all-time high. Hundreds of former members of staff applying to come back, those who left during the pandemic and otherwise. All of your schools full, 99.8%, I think. So it's probably still 0.2
Almost
that you
there.
could find. You could find 0.2% with waiting lists as well. And then I suppose the all-important ones, the exam results, and just looking at them, in the IB results last year, 90% of the students who were presented got 30 plus points against a global average of 56. 65% got 35 points or more against that world average of 28. And this one's just astonishing. 32% of ESF students who were presented for the IB diploma got 40 points or more against a global figure of 9%. And I guess the question that leads me to think is, why do you think we need to change?
Well, do you know, Rob, I mean, I'm so proud of the organisation and everything that is achieved, but the very fact that we have, such high success is down to the fact that we are really engaged in thinking about what do we provide for our kids. And, I see the world changing really fast ahead of us. And if you stand still, you get left behind. And therefore, whilst we have great success just now by any measures, we're not complacent. We really do want to look at how do we ensure that we stay relevant and that we continue to have incredible results year on year.
But let's look a bit more about what in actual fact is changing. I mean, you're talking a lot about change. I've heard you speak forcefully and quite passionately about it. Yeah. What's changing? What's forcing you to think that education can't
well,
stay
life.
the same?
I mean, you just need to look at life. Isn't life really changing all around us? Technology, the technological advances that we now have that's enabling us to do incredible things at breakneck speed. We can't afford, education cannot afford to keep doing what we've always done the way we've always done it and expect our kids to have the skills and the confidence, quite frankly, to face what is, as I see it, an unpredictable but a hugely exciting future.
I mean, we're hearing a lot about AI, and I presume it's AI that you're thinking about when you're talking about the changes that are going on round about us. I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember, technological changes in the classroom over a number of years. I think about the BBC micros appearing in the classrooms and iPads and the internet and all those different things. What makes AI different? What makes it different this time around?
Well, I just think the power. I mean, firstly, can I just say, Rob, you're too kind to say that we are both about the same age, because I think I could have probably taught you. And I do remember as a young teacher, technology coming into the classroom, but it was done at a really slow pace where teachers were given a chance to get to grips with the technology. I remember the old floppy disks and the disk drives and planning out for teacher education so that teachers were equipped to support kids to learn about computers. I think what's changed is there is no time for that. We are learning with the kids. In fact, we are learning from the kids. Technology is hitting our lives, every aspect of our lives. And in education, we can't afford not to engage with technology. I think it's a really important moment in time, however, to pause and really think about what's important in education, because technology is there to enhance and support the work we do, but it helps us to be much more intentional and focused on the things that I think really matter in education, and that's being human and being able to develop the skills that our students will need to have in the years to come to be able to use the technology.
A point about being human. We were both at a conference recently where we heard somebody from the medical profession who was making that exact same point, that AI should enable people to be better doctors, be better sort of medical practitioners, but also allow them the time and space to be more human and have better interactions with patients. Is that what you're getting at here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about the work that we're doing in ESF, where we're looking at how do we really embrace the technology? How do we use AI to support teachers in working closely with students? We talk a lot about personalised learning, and that increasingly is becoming important as we face the future. And for our students to get opportunities in classrooms to use the technology and for their learning to be supported by the technology. But for a teacher, I mean, the teacher's role in education will remain, I believe, absolutely critical in helping support children as they navigate through what hopefully will be exciting times in education, not something we should be afraid of.
I mean, on that point, is the debate over about the use of AI in education?
No, absolutely no. I mean, the thing is, we're all talking about AI, and with ESF, I remember the moment that someone said, "Have you seen this?" And it was just at the back of COVID when we thought we were getting things back to normal as we'd hoped, and the power of it, really took my breath away, really, and I sort of thought about what might this mean for us. And the initial response from people round about me was, we have to ban this.
Yeah.
We can't have this in our classrooms. We can't allow students to use it. My instinct was not to ban, of course, was to say, let's understand that better and let's see how we might be able to use that to support our students.
And how do you see it developing? Because, I mean, the debate about ethical use, and I know lots of parents are worried about, how their children are using this, and there's debates in universities, there's debates right through education. I mean, that kind of ethical point, that's still a live debate, right?
Oh, it is. And I mean, I wouldn't pretend to have all the answers. And I suppose that's the thing. We don't know where this is heading. And that's why it's so important that we engage our teachers and our parents and our students in thinking about what can AI be used for to support them in their day-to-day lives and in their learning. But, I think it's really important that we as educators are able to identify the things that remain important that AI can't do. If we look at the early years of education, if we look at very young children and how they learn and the really important foundational skills, literacy, numeracy, they're still important. And, I can't see AI replacing a teacher. I can see teachers who know how to use AI becoming the kinds of teachers that we want in our classrooms.
And that's the key thing, isn't it? It's not just about, here's a technology that can make a teacher's life easier in the sense that it takes away some of that administrative burden. It's actually about how do teachers use that to help them develop their own practice.
Exactly, and it's not taking away the role of the teacher. I remember, when I was studying for my master's, which was so long ago, it was before computers, before you could use a computer to write your thesis, and I had an electric typewriter. And if I wanted to change anything in the text, I had to completely rewrite the whole chapter. If you stop and think about, that's laughable if you were to say that to students now. They can make changes so quickly and so easily. We can't hold back the technology, but I think what we have to do is work with our teachers to help them engage with the technology and identify what students still need to be confident learners. And by that, I mean able to think critically, able to not just solve problems, but find problems to solve. And as we know, being able to collaborate, work in groups, work with others, and be able to communicate and share their thinking, these are really important skills.
Is it even remotely possible to predict where this is all going in the next 3-5 years? Can you?
Yeah, I would say the prediction is it's all going to change. It's going to change really fast. And I think if people are wanting space and time to go away and to reflect and to go to conferences, I think they're going to be left behind. I think this is the world we now live in. Things are moving quickly. And I think, therefore, as educationalists, we have to be really clear. What are the things that are really important? Why do students come into school every day? What are the experiences that we think are really important that they need to have? But not looking to ban the technology, not looking to remove the technology. But I think the technology will continue to develop at an increasing pace. And as educationalists, we have to really focus in on what learning for the future is going to look like. And it really has to change.
How do you keep up with something that's developing so quickly, or is it just an impossible task? Have you just got to react over and over again?
I think we can it can't be free range. We can't say people can just use whatever technology they want. So I think there's work to do within systems to share the thinking, share the professional learning, and to be able to, copy and steal everything that's really important to us.
Yeah.
So I would say that I can't see us getting ahead of it, but I think we have to engage with it. And I think what I'm saying is we need to be really clear. What are the things that we know are really important in education? Let's focus our time and attention on that. Let's use the technology and find ways of using the technology that's going to enhance that and help students. I mean, they say that the new generation that's just been born, that will be with us in the next few years coming through our system, they're going to be the generation who's going to learn the most. They're going to be the quickest learners. They're going to be the smartest kids. And therefore, education has to take that into account. But there are other things that these kids will need to learn. And clearly, the foundational skills still need to be taught.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that brings us on, I suppose, to the vision for 2030,
Yes.
which is something I know that ESF is going to be launching very shortly. And I guess the remarkable thing about this document is probably less what's in it and more what's not.
Yeah.
Because your traditional corporate 5-year plan would be full of mission statements and visions and values and KPIs and long-term targets and delivery plans and outcomes and all this kind of stuff. And that's not what the vision for 2030 for ESF looks like. I wonder if you could just sort of tell me a little bit about how you've gone from where we were, where we did have a document that looked like that, to something that looks very different today.
Well, do you know, I mean, the thing is, I'm laughing as you're saying all of that because I'm remembering when I was a young principal in Scotland, and it was so long ago, it was a time when the principal would write the school development plan. And then if it was an effective principal, they would perhaps share that with their staff or maybe not. And I decided to work with a group of principals and say, look, this doesn't make sense. We need to work with our staff. We need to engage them in thinking about how we bring about change. And this was at a time where I was studying for my master's. I was really thinking about collaboration well before collaboration became something that we did in education. And we all agreed that we were not going to be handing in a school development plan to the Education Authority. We agreed that what we would do is make the development year a year of collaboration and people working together. And you know what I'm about to say. The only school not to hand in a plan was my school. And the Director of Education came out to see me because he was really interested in the thinking that was there. Now, I would say throughout my quite long career now, we've never quite got to the point where I felt that I was trying to get to, even in those early days. And that was one of saying, let's not have the glossy published brochures that say, here are the goals, here are the KPIs, this is what we're all going to do. The only person who really understands what's in the document is the person who wrote it, and that everybody else puts it on the shelf and they look a bit vague when you ask them about that. I would say in ESF that we went through that phase, and the ESF board wanted a report every quarter, and we had to look at the KPIs. It was an industry in itself.
Yep.
And I would say that the information we gave the board was true, but was it having a real impact on what was happening in the classrooms? And I would have to say it wasn't. If you were to ask the principals to share the work in their schools and match it against the KPIs, I think they would have struggled. And so I feel very fortunate that we at ESF have a board that's been prepared to come on this journey with me and the SMT and the principals of ESF, where we've said, we don't know what the future holds. We don't want to set 5-year concrete targets that are going to restrict what we can do, but we want to set a direction. We know what we're trying to achieve. You started off by sharing all the successes. ESF is not broken. We're a hugely successful education system, but we're not complacent. So we really wanted to empower and really enable teachers and schools to do some great things for kids. And so when the board agreed to take in this much more agile approach, where they would agree a strategic direction and they would empower me, working with the senior leaders, to empower our teachers in our schools, for me, that was really liberating. And I think we've worked really hard to find ways to ensure that we have small iterative steps of progress that I think is going to enable us to do some great work into the future as things are changing so fast.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, no matter which industry you work in, education or finance, insurance, whatever it might be, I always feel there's a gap between, these glossy 5-year documents and the practitioners, the people on the front line, because, not only would some of our leaders struggle to understand or reconcile what's in the document, if you take it to people on the front line, I mean, it does feel pretty distant.
It does. Absolutely does. And I mean, the thing is, if you start to think about what we're trying to do, we're trying to engage and we're trying to empower and mobilise people to be thinking and working differently, to be finding better ways of working. It just seems, out of date now to be saying, and we've now recorded that in a plan that will tell people what to do over the next 5 years. And if anything, all it does is focus people on the wrong things.
Yeah. So thinking about this, the Vision for 2030 document, which your organisation is now going to get access to, and is I think genuinely exciting in terms of what's going on in education around the world. I mean, there's 5 key steps, I suppose. The first one is just to sort of set out the principles behind the strategy, and we've touched on the first one, which is we just can't predict the future, so it's a bit of a fool's errand to try and do so. And the second one, before we move on, is in order to make the right type of decisions, you have to know where you are in the here and now.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for you to know what steps to make to bring about improvement, you need to absolutely understand what's working well and what's not. If you're looking for new and better ways of working, you need to know what's delivering well for the students, for the teachers, for the schools, and what's not. So that real understanding of the lived experience, and I'm going beyond it being an assessment or an inspection, someone coming in to inspect against some criteria that they're then going to report on. It's that really getting to the heart of how teachers feel about the work they do and the experience that students feel every day in the classroom, really understanding what that means, and even talking to parents so that you fully understand their whole frustrations or their happiness in what we're doing across the system.
I mean, there's a cultural aspect to this as well, isn't there? I suppose if you're saying that the key people who can help us make the right decisions, those small iterative changes you're talking about, are the people on the front line. You have to have a culture, I suppose, where people on the front line feel psychologically safe.
Yep.
To be able to speak up and tell people like yourself, people like the principal in the school, what they actually think. How do you go about creating that?
Well, I mean, I think creating the culture is, again, it's to do with lived experience. We can talk about culture, we can tell people that we have a culture, but unless that's what they're experiencing, that's not the culture of the organisation. In ESF, we've done a lot of work with principals talking about how do we work together, how do we build collegiality and trust across the system and within the schools. And I think if a class teacher feels that they are trusted to do the work that we're expecting them to do, to make decisions for the students in their class, if we're empowering the teacher and we're ensuring that they're given professional learning opportunities, then what we have is we have the right people, if you like, making decisions at a very local level. In all schools, you need teachers and support staff to feel that they are cared for personally, but that they're challenged directly. We're not, as I often say, we're not running the country club. This is not about creating a culture where everybody's just very happy. People are happy, purposefully engaged in the work that they do. So there has to be a professional challenge there. And I suppose I'm very proud of the fact that across ESF, I don't have to work very hard at putting in that challenge, because the challenge comes from the teachers and the support staff themselves. People want to do a really good job for kids.
Yep.
And therefore they're prepared to go to conferences, they're prepared to do their own professional learning, they're prepared to work together collegiately in their schools and across ESF. They're prepared to look at what other people are doing and to really critically think about the work that they're doing. It doesn't need a lot of push from me. It's coming from the whole system.
I mean, it does require trust, though, doesn't it? I suppose from the people on the front line, the trust is that they can speak up and they will be listened to.
Yeah.
And then from the leadership point of view, there's almost a devolution of responsibility, pushing things down the way. And that, again, not every leader, not every organisation would be prepared to do something like that, to really devolve decision making down to the lowest possible level.
I think you're absolutely right. But that's where I suppose the real opportunities lie for us to do great things in and across our schools. If we talk about staff having the courage, if you like, to speak truth to power. So we need people to be able to say, I know that you're the principal or you're the CEO, but here's how things are for me in my classroom. We need people to be really open and to feel safe in sharing their own lived experience in order for us to really understand what needs, if anything, to change. But the local decision making is absolutely critical in the whole approach that ESF takes. And that's one of enabling, not providing. So our schools aren't waiting to be told what to do, but it's not free range. So schools have to be very conscious that any decision they make may impact on other ESF schools. And that's why the principals work so closely together as a senior leadership team with the SMT. So it's not about everybody doing the same, but everybody making their decisions based on their local need, but understanding the whole concept of reciprocity. So whatever I do, if it impacts on another school, I need to be aware of that. And I need to care enough about the whole system, not just my school. So you'll hear me talk about subsidiarity, reciprocity, and saying local decision making is absolutely critical. We should be empowering principals who should be empowering their teachers to be making local decisions. But as you pointed out, what comes with that is accountability. And part of accountability is the responsibility. And if you're responsible, you have to have the ability to respond. So you need to be given enough space to be making decisions. But, we are accountable for all that we do. And again, I'm in a very privileged position where I have people who care about the work they do and the impact of that work on children. So people take that accountability seriously.
I mean, broadening this out to, beyond ESF, just thinking about education more generally, there are plenty of examples of school systems that are, very bureaucratic, that are very centralised, they're very tight on regulation, lots of paperwork, and you hear all these tales of teachers saying that they can't teach because they've got so much paperwork and so much bureaucracy to contend with. What difference does it make, this approach? What's the real benefit?
Well, I mean, I think the systems that you're describing, they will eventually break because you can't actually innovate and you can't expect teachers to find new, better ways of working if they're spending their time having to fulfill what is a more bureaucratic system. So I think what we're doing, I mean, I don't think we've got all the answers, by the way, but I think what we're doing is we are recognising the need to empower our staff to be able to think critically about the work they do and to embrace technology and what's happening in the world, and to think about that with what the current resources that we have, the students that we have. And I mean, teacher agency for me is absolutely key here. We have to trust and respect that the teacher will make the best decisions based on, of course, the accountability that I've just spoken about. But we have to find ways of empowering teachers to be working in this fast-paced, changing world, looking at the needs of the children in their class, understanding the curriculum framework that we use, but making decisions that are, for the best, meeting the best needs of the kids in front of them.
I mean, how do parents react to this? I always say that, that I'm a parent myself, and even though I work in education now, I still base my view of education on the one that I got, the one that I received. How do you think parents will react to this notion of, being much more agile?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I'm smiling because education isn't that different to when I was at school, and that was a long time ago, or when I was teaching in a class. I mean, education's never, it's never stood still. There are changes, and I can see that there have been changes throughout the years that I've been a student myself, as a teacher, principal, and other aspects of my career, which has been all in education. I can see the changes that are there. I think what's going to happen with parents is a helpful, let's say, aftermath of COVID is that parents see beyond just examination results. And I think the world is starting to look differently at that too. And that's going to be really helpful if we start thinking about how do we really assess a child's learning and their skills and their competencies. How do we assess the needs of the system, if you like, the world of work? What is it we're looking to achieve through education? That's all starting to change, and people are talking now differently about the skills and about examination results not being the end product, the outcome, if you like. So I would say that, I mean, parents, let's be honest, parents want the best for their child. And, I've worked in a range of systems, and I've always worked with parents, no matter where, that they want the best. They don't always know what's best for their child, I have to be honest, but they want what's best for the child. And therefore, I think the way ahead is to be working ever increasingly close to parents about just this, so that parents understand what educationalists are thinking about the changes in the world, and that we're taking account the thinking that parents have and their wishes for the education that they want for their child.
Yeah. Let's go back to Vision 2030 just for a moment, because while it's not got a lot of those traditional aspects, mission statements, vision, values, it has got structure. It's based around a couple of things. One of which is something called that you refer to as the 3A's.
Yes.
Which is essentially, I think, how you think the organisation should be working. Those 3A's, which are agile, aligned, and accountable. How important are they? What do they do for the organisation, and what do they do for this plan?
Well, when we came up with the 3A's, these were the strategic drivers. And these, I suppose, unlocked the whole strategy so that we didn't have to say, here's a whole list of projects, here are the KPIs, and we'll report on that. What we said to the board was we need to be agile. So we see the world changing really fast ahead of us. Now, this was pre-COVID times when we came up with the 3A's as our strategic drivers, and it was based on technology, but we knew nothing at that point as to how technology was going to start to advance. But we did recognise that the world was changing and that technology was becoming more important for us in education. And that sense of teachers being able to really think through what are the needs that students may have into the future. So looking at the world of work, looking at all the different reports, thinking about all the different competencies, and being able to really be very intentional about here are the foundational skills that are still important that we need to teach, and here are other areas that we now need to really consider, are these important for our students? So that became, I suppose, the real driver. How do we ensure that the organisation is agile and that we can enable teachers to be able to change the way in which they teach? Because we have 22 schools, being aligned became an important part of this, because there was no free range. This was not people could just go off and do what they wanted. And I suppose that is maybe a misunderstanding of the way in which we work, because you have to be comfortable with ambiguity. You have to be able to say, I don't know exactly what the project looks like, but I know what we're doing is we're building capacity. So I often talk about, it's like give a person a fish and you feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and you're feeding them for a lifetime. So this way in which we were working was saying, we don't know the answer for this year or even 5 years, but we're going to develop the real capacity in the system to be able to meet the needs no matter what. and working together across the 22 schools, staying aligned, became really important. Third day, of course, being accountability, and all of it hinges on us continuously assessing what's the impact of what we're doing, and do we need to pivot or change or move more?
Yeah, I mean, there is that sort of fourth implied A here, isn't it, which is ambiguity.
Yes.
And that's really at the heart of this entire conversation and this entire plan. But your systems don't like ambiguity. Bureaucracies tend not to thrive when there's ambiguity. How do you get that point across that it's okay to just accept it?
Well, I think that's where the accountability is so important. I think you have to be able to show that you're having positive impact. And, let me be clear, education is too important to take risks. And we certainly would not be taking a risk with other people's children's education. So it's not about us just, playing fast and loose with kids' education. But I think if we continue with a more traditional structure with bureaucracy, it just locks everybody down in a world that's moving so fast. I think we do have to trust teachers and principals, and we do have to work closely with parents so that we're all aligned and we're all talking about the quality of the lived experience or the learning experience for the students. That becomes really, really important. If what we do is stick with what is an outdated, I would suggest, bureaucratic system, then that's just going to prevent us from making any progress, any innovation. And the one thing I don't want for ESF is to wait to be told to change and how to change. I think the real strength is building capacity in the system and allowing the teachers to be the people who really shape the way ahead for our students. They're the ones who are closest working with them, but done in a coherent way across our schools.
Yeah. I mean, there's some identified priority areas that I want to take you to sort of discuss those in a moment, but I want to bring you back to this point about teacher agency, because really at the heart of this is that notion of giving teachers the choice to look at their own practice and make changes. So you hear agency used a lot when you're talking about students. It's for me, it's quite unusual to hear it discussed when you're talking about teachers.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think, again, this isn't new, Rob. If I look at a really excellent teacher when I was teaching a long time ago, teacher agency was there. And I think teachers who are prepared to, let's say, push the system to ensure that their students get what they need and not come in and teach the curriculum. I mean, I often say we don't teach the IB or we don't teach the curriculum, we teach children. And we use the IB, we use the curriculum to support us in doing that. So, an effective teacher, even if you go back 40, 50 years, an effective teacher was always a teacher who knew their students well and was prepared to use the system to support the child and not fit the child into the system. And when I talk about agency now in ESF for the Vision 2030, it's recognising that. It's how ESF is going to really empower our teachers to take the professional decisions, to be held accountable for those decisions, and to be clear with teachers what our expectations are. But for me, teacher agency is giving them the space and the permission to make decisions that they then will be held accountable for, but they then will be able to ensure that their students are getting the best learning and they're not waiting to be told what someone else thinks they should be doing in their classroom. So it's not about working to a programme, it's not about implementing what someone at head office or someone in another school thinks they should be doing. It's setting a clear direction and then enabling that teacher, all teachers, to be able to say, and this is what my students will need to make, positive steps in the right direction.
I mean, if you're a teacher, is there discomfort in that? Because I guess there's a security blanket of knowing here's the plan.
For me, it's much easier to go in and teach the curriculum, teach a programme. You know what you're teaching Monday through to Friday, 1 week to the next, 1 month to the next. But that's not really good teaching. And I suppose if you have world-class teachers, which I believe we have in ESF, we have people who are coming who aren't content just to teach the curriculum or teach the program. They're teaching the kids, and they're using that curriculum and program, and they're thinking critically about that program and the curriculum and challenging, is this what my class need? And let me tell you, the needs of students, even if you go back 2 or 3 years pre-COVID, the needs of students have changed now. And we have teachers who are challenging some of the structures that we have and the curriculum that's there and the pedagogy, how we go about teaching things. And that's what we want. We want people to come and think critically about what they're doing. Because what's important is that for every child coming into ESF every day, that their needs are being met.
I mean, is some of this a response to the change that we're seeing in students and, you know, all the challenges we're seeing, you know, beyond education having an impact on our schools?
I mean, I think we have to be really careful there because, you know, we're not medical therapists, and I know people talk a lot about mental health and well-being, and we're not trying to take the place of counsellors and therapists. But I think, you know, we need to, if we're meeting the needs of kids, we have to ensure that we have the right people and we have the proper support services that we can draw on to meet the needs of kids. So I think, you know, I've read a lot about well-being and the need for schools to spend more time looking at well-being. I think there's a little danger there that becomes the big focus. I think if children need support with well-being issues, or staff for that matter, then we should be ready to step in and support that. But I think engaging kids in their learning and exciting them about what lies ahead and giving them a real focus beyond that is what enables kids to have a more positive sense of being.
So I said that there was priority areas in the vision document, one of which is a word that will be well known to people who work in education, which is personalisation. But there's 2 words that perhaps do require a little bit more explaining, and those are belonging and engagement. What do they mean in the context of this plan?
Yeah, well, I think belonging is the cornerstone. I mean, unless you, as a member of staff or a student, unless you truly feel you belong, then you're not going to be able to operate to your optimum. And, you know, we talk about our students and staff being celebrated for who they are. So if we talk about a mosaic, we're saying we celebrate everyone for the differences, for their differences, for who they are as a person. We'll say, you know, don't negotiate who you are, or don't be someone that you're not to fit in. And I think that that's been work that we've looked really closely at, because ESF does have an inclusion policy, and we would say that we're very inclusive. You know, we welcome children and staff from all over the world. But actually the lived experience for some wasn't as we might have hoped or wanted. And therefore we've done work to say it's not about people fitting into the ESF way or fitting in to be a certain type of person to be a member of the ESF community. The ESF community welcomes, celebrates everybody for who they are. And that's work that we're doing. So the sense of belonging, I think, is really important. Because only if you take it from a child's perspective, only if you feel seen, heard, and that you do belong, are you going to be in a position to really learn and be the best you can be.
And engagement?
Well, engagement, I think, is absolutely critical, because we've been talking about teacher agency and we've been talking about personalisation, how we look at how we change and find better ways of working. That comes from the level of engagement. And, you know, I would want every member of staff to be coming every day ready to learn themselves, ready to think critically about the work they do, and to be open to new ways of working. You know, I don't think ESF or indeed education systems across the world can afford to have people who are coming in to work in the way they've always worked from going back quite a number of years.
But how do you build professional development and at a time when things are changing so much? How do you even attempt to tackle that one?
Well, the thing is, again, I think we need to be really careful. It's not seen as it's courses and it's conferences. I mean, we're learning all the time, and it's making space, if you like, for teachers to be able to think about what they do. And we're very fortunate in ESF where we do have, I would say, good amount of time where teachers are not class committed to their class, and they get time to work collaboratively within their year groups or across the school or with other schools. But teachers do need to have the space and time to be able to think critically, to read, our staff are really keen to not just go to conferences, but to engage in conferences, to prepare and present at conferences. So it's really looking at how do we create networks of staff working together who feel that the work they do is valued. And I think maybe that's the point. I remember one time I had only been in ESF a matter of months, and I was walking very early morning to the MTR through one of the big shopping centres, and I saw a group of teachers, and they waved over to me, and I went over to speak to them. Here they were meeting ahead of school because they were so excited about some of the development work they were doing across some of the schools that they'd all met up to have a coffee and to talk about that. And I remember walking away thinking, wow, I've never experienced that where people care so much that they've had a very early morning breakfast meeting together just to talk about their work. So I think what we need to do, however, is to acknowledge the work of our teachers, to celebrate that, and for them to see that it does indeed matter.
I mean, if you bring all of this together, I mean, you and I are both from the UK, and you can tell by our accents that we're from Scotland. There's always headlines about, morale amongst teachers and systems around the world. But I think what we're talking about here is, freeing teachers up to place trust in them, to give them the chance to professionally grow. And that seems to me to be at the heart of a lot of what we're talking about here with the Vision 2030 is it's actually about, placing that trust again in the teachers and saying that you are a professional who can do the right job for us. And on that, I mean, everything in the plan funnels down to this point, which is obviously the kid in the classroom. And personalisation feels like one of those words that's getting used a lot. What does it actually mean to you when you think, if I was to ask you to define personalisation, what does it mean?
I mean, I think for personalisation, it's every child being seen, heard, and known, not just as a learner, but as a person too. Now, that doesn't mean that in a classroom you would have 30 individual plans and kids off doing their own individual learning. There'd be aspects of that. But I think it is that really leaning into where are kids' strengths, where are their interests? How do I, as a teacher, make sure that as a class and within a class, a group, and within a group, individuals are truly engaged in their learning? Now, I would have to say, you mentioned that we're both from Scotland, and a lot of my career was spent in Scotland. And I would say the biggest challenge for me in Scotland was how do I engage children and parents in the education process, because the parents were just devolving that to schools, and the kids often didn't want to be there and didn't want to learn. And so it was an uphill struggle with them, and we had to be really creative in finding ways of engaging them in their learning. That's not the challenge. That is not the challenge in ESF. And in ESF, for me, it's saying, how do we make sure that every child feels excited? Every day they come into school, they're excited about the learning. How do we make sure that they are indeed making good progress? I went to a school last week. I start every day in a school. I love to meet the teachers, to meet the kids. And I'm meeting this student who's telling me about a conference that she is organising. There are people who are flying in from outside Hong Kong to take part. And I had to take a minute to say to the principal, is this a teacher I'm speaking to? I was a bit confused. She said, no, that's a year 13 student. So for me, finding ways of really engaging kids, that's personalisation, really finding where their strengths are. How do we ensure that school is going to be a positive, memorable experience for them? That's our job, is to find how do we make education meaningful to every child. It's not about them all following their own path. It's not about them all just using laptops and using AI. It's about saying to kids, you know, here are the skills that we're developing, that you're developing. It's really engaging them and thinking about their education, thinking about how they best learn, thinking about how they make best progress, and supporting them in that way.
I mean, I've got one final question, but before I get to that, I mean, how do you stop what you've just described being devolved or passed off to technology? So it's not just AI can come up with 30 individual lesson plans and you plonk kids down in front of a laptop and that's their learning for the day. How do you avoid that?
I think that's the challenge for education to now at speed, to work really quickly, to work out what are the things that we need teachers in classrooms to be really focused in on. So yes, students can use laptops and they can go off and sit in a corner and they can do some program and develop some skills. But we need the teachers then to be working with the students to be making sense of that and to help guide them through what would be the next step. So it's not a case of being able to complete a program on a computer and say, I've now learned that. How do you apply that? How do you test that? How do you check that the child really has a good understanding of that concept? And then there are other skills, of course, that children can only develop if they're in with people. So the human side of things. So looking at how do we work together and find problems to solve? How do we communicate our learning? How do we look at the emotional and social development, which is important? And you mentioned well-being earlier. You know, how do we ensure that kids are feeling good and comfortable about themselves? And we're building resilience. So it's not about everything being positive. Kids need to learn that it's okay to fail. Kids need to learn that if you fall down, you get back up. So all of these things are important life skills that we need teachers to be able to do that kids can't do on their own with a laptop. Yeah.
Final question, and it's almost counterintuitive actually, based on the conversation we've just had. But I'm gonna ask you to cast yourself forward 5 years, and what would success look like if the vision for 2030 is realised? What does education look like?
Well, I mean, I would say I'm excited by the opportunities that lie ahead. If I could answer it for ESF first, I would say for ESF, we would have real coherence across our schools in that our students are joining ESF and we have lots of different pathways that they can take in their learning. And that might mean working across more than one school. It would be an education system that really celebrates great success for every child, and that we have good partnerships with world-class universities and employers, and that we are working closely beyond education to ensure that our education truly is an education worth having for the future. I think for education, and not that I'm trying to solve the world's problems with education, but I think looking at education systems across the world, I think universities will be working differently with us, looking at how do we assess students' learning and move away from things being exam scores to really understanding the skills, the competencies that children have. And I think it would be a teaching force where teachers are absolutely excited about opportunities and that people respect teachers for their professional knowledge and how they're able to embrace the technology that I don't know what that will look like in 5 years' time, but they will be embracing that technology and they'll be working with students to make sure that our students are really confident and able to face the future with not just skills and competencies, but real confidence about what lies ahead.
Sounds like a future worth chasing. Belinda, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.